Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. We're going to talk about how to conduct a successful job search and then negotiate your best offer. So I thought I would give you a little background on myself. So my name is Barbara Day, and I manage the Biometrics recruiting division of Penfield Search Partners. And I personally have been recruiting in biostatistics and biometrics for 25 years. So today what I'm going to do is try and bring the knowledge that I've collected over the last 25 years to help you conduct a job search and proper negotiations. Okay. So we're going to start with where to begin. That's the best place for us to start and can be the most challenging piece as well. So the first thing you really want to do for yourself is evaluate your career goals. Where do you want to go with your career? What's your ultimate goal? Also think about if you're just starting out in your career, you haven't worked anywhere yet, think about what kind of problems resonate with you. What kind of data do you want to work with? Do finance problems, is that something that resonates with you? Does marketing resonate with you? Does big data, like Google, does that resonate with you? Does the pharmaceutical industry helping bring drugs to market, is that something that excites you? That's your best place to start. It gives you narrows down your field of what companies to look at, what types of jobs to look at. And then if you're a little later in your career, you want to ask yourself, well, where do I want to be? Do I ultimately want to head up a department? Do I want to head up a company? Do I really think I'm going to like managing people? All of those things help you to figure out where to start in your career. And your next question you ask yourself, once you figure out this is where I ultimately want to go, so where am I in that continuum? Am I just at the beginning? Am I in the middle? Or am I really maybe, one job away from my ultimate career goal? What skills do I need to gain? So do I need to get management skills? So am I going to be looking for a job that has direct reports, or that maybe has management on the matrix? That's the first step in management skills. What type of statistical skills do you need? I focus in the pharmaceutical industry, so a lot of the examples that I'm going to give you are from that space. Do you have full project responsibilities? Do you manage a full compound or a platform of compounds? Is that something you want to do? What are the skills that I need to learn? Do I need to learn to be more influential? And then you ask yourself about those, interim steps to get to your next goal. Is that, as I mentioned before, is my next job my ultimate job? Or do I need to have a couple of steps so I can gain all the skills that I need for that final goal? Yeah, is there a question? Then the next question you want to ask yourself is, do I work with a recruiter or do I not work with a recruiter? And this is an interesting, has evolved over the years. And I would say if you are an entry-level candidate, you're just coming out of school, just finishing up your degree, you do not want to depend on recruiters to help you find a job. Companies really want you to search them out directly. So I'll talk about that in our next slide, how you actually do that, how you actually search out companies directly. But then experienced level, mid-career, a knowledgeable recruiter can be really helpful. You want to find somebody that you really trust, that you feel like they understand the market, they understand where you work, the type of companies that you work with, and they've got a lot of knowledge there. You never want to work with a recruiter who asks you to pay them money. So that's just something to keep in mind. If the recruiter asks you to pay them money for the search, that's not how it works in the industry. And then as you get more and more senior, having a relationship with a few different recruiters can be very, very helpful. It can really give you a lot of insights into the industry, what they're seeing as far as movement goes at senior level jobs. Now, where do you find these opportunities? Company websites, obviously, it's a very great resource. Companies tend to post all of their jobs except for their very, very most senior jobs. It's a little bit time consuming though. You really have to constantly search companies' websites. So there are ways that you can do some automated searches for yourself. So Google job search is a great one. You can just put in a little bit, don't have to even put in a lot of data, but you put in the job titles that you're looking for and location, and every day you get an email. You get the same things from Indeed and then also from LinkedIn as well. And then, as I mentioned before, particularly at the more senior levels, mid to senior levels, recruiting firms, both contingent and retained firms, can be great resources. You will find that people reach out to you all of the time. So you don't have to respond to all those emails, but just, take a look, keep yourself aware of what the market is, what people are talking about. It's extremely helpful. So now that we've gone out there and we've found some jobs that are really interesting, let's talk about interviewing and the successful steps for interviewing, both virtual, and we're starting to get back into some of the on-site interviews as well. So your steps are going to be scheduling and information, your setup, preparation, the actual interview, and then your follow-up. So when you're scheduling and information gathering, this is probably the most critical piece in the beginning. So when you're scheduling an interview, be as flexible as you can be. When a company asks you for your availability, give them several days and times that you're available for your initial interview. And then for subsequent interviews, when you start to do your full panel interviews, give large swaths of time and understand that if the interview is going to be virtual, chances are it's going to be held over multiple days. I think people's schedules are more difficult now than they were before the pandemic. We all have lots and lots more meetings. And when you're not flying in, the pressure to have everything happen in one day isn't as intense. So companies are really splitting these interviews out over several days. So you definitely want to be prepared for that. It does add a lot of challenges. We have to prepare ourselves. We have to prepare our space for multiple days of interviews. But in a lot of ways, it's very helpful for you because you often get to meet with more people than you would if you were going on site. So you want to also ask questions of your scheduler. So ask who you're going to be speaking with. Ask what their title is. Ask for an interview schedule when you're going for your full panel interview. That way you'll have everyone's name and their title. And then you can help research those interviewers. When you go online, you want to go on LinkedIn, you want to do Google searches for these people. You want to search out their publications. So you have an understanding of what their knowledge base is. And if they're not statisticians, how would they interact with statisticians? What are they going to be interested in hearing from you so you can help prepare yourself? You also want to research the company. You want to be able to come to this interview with some very good, solid reasons why you want to work for each particular company. So that can be that their products resonate with you. It can be that their therapeutic focus, if you're looking at a pharmaceutical company, is something that's particularly interesting to you, or that you have the skill sets that fit very well with that therapeutic area or that space that they're recruiting for. It is most companies nowadays really want to see that you know who they are and that you like who they are, and you can talk about why that is good for you and why you'll be good for them. So now we come to the setup for the phone or virtual interviews. These can be really critical. You really want to test your video and your audio. So have your friend, your spouse work with you, set up a meeting in the actual application that's going to be used. Like today we're using Zoom. So sometimes it's Microsoft Teams. There's other platforms. The last thing you want to have happen is you go to log on and you need to download some software. It's happened to me. It's pretty embarrassing. 10 minutes late because I didn't have the proper software downloaded. So, or my software decided it needed to update. So that's always really critical. And then also assess your surroundings. So my surroundings here, as you can see, I've not blurred my background, and I'll tell you why. You want to have a very neutral background. I would say my background is a little too busy for an interview. You want all the attention to be focused on you and not on the picture that's on your wall or what's on the shelves behind you, like you can see with me here. Also, for what you're going to wear, you want to dress as if you were going for an on-site interview, at least from the waist up. Anything can be seen, should be really professional. And, suit jacket, nice top, tie, really come in professional. You will find your interviewers are not going to be dressed like that, but they will still expect you to be. So, and the next thing is also get the supplies that you need to have ready. So it is really important to have a glass of water for your interview. You do not want to have like a squeeze bottle or anything like that. You want to have a nice glass of water or a coffee mug. It just looks more professional. And after an hour or several hours of talking, you're going to need that. You're going to need something to drink. You want to be prepared. Have notebooks, take notes. And in asking an interviewer if it's okay if you take notes, they usually say yes, and they actually appreciate the fact that you're doing so. And this is, again, another, kind of test your surroundings. Lighting is really critical. And I would say one of the best things you can do for yourself, make sure that you're lit from the front, but not too much. And the very inexpensive little ring lights are perfect. You get one, for $10 or $15, and they really make you look professional, very easy to see your facial expressions. And now we're going to talk about setting up your on-site interview. So here you want to ask a lot of questions again. Can I drive to this interview? Do I have to fly to this interview? Will the company cover the travel for me? Are they going to set that up? Don't make the assumption that they will, but definitely do not set up travel for yourself without asking. If you are flying to an interview, I always suggest to plan for delays. So either fly in the day before, if at all possible, or take the very, very first flight out in the morning, reducing the chances that you're going to be on a flight that's either delayed or canceled. Happens a lot now. And again, the same thing, what to wear. You really want to, again, dress professionally. It's critical. Suit, tie, really professional, but also feel comfortable. You want to wear something that makes you feel confident and makes you feel comfortable that is going to be perceived as being really professional. Okay. Now this part, and this gets to be more and more critical the more experienced you get in your career. So the further along you get, the more you have to prepare. So I remember working with somebody for a VP level role, and this individual told me that they had spent about 80 hours preparing for their interview. So it is critical, sorry about that, that you review your resume. You can speak to every single bullet point on your resume. Pardon me. A company is not going to be happy, an interviewer is not going to be happy if you say, wow, that was 10 years ago. I don't really remember what happened then. So if you take the time, go back through your resume, really, scour your memory, look back through notes, pull up information, and make some notes for yourself about it. I always suggest, you want to, as you're preparing, you want to write down your answers to questions. You want to write down what you've done on past projects. It helps that memory connection when you actually write things down. And then you'll also have your notes for later, for as you interview. Practice the answers to your questions. Practice them so that it feels comfortable, that you're not like pulling things from your memory. It's like, no, I've prepared for this. I know what I need to talk about. I've pulled out different pieces of my projects that I know are going to be interesting, and I've prepared myself to answer these questions. Pardon me, sorry about that. And then you also want to create a list of questions for your interviewers. So most of the time, not always, but most of the time, you'll have an opportunity to ask one or two questions of your interviewers. And so you really want to be prepared for that. As I mentioned before, when you're doing your research on your interviewers, think about how they interact with a statistician. What's going to be interesting to them and what's going to be interesting for you to understand about what they do. Those are the questions that you're going to want to have set up for yourself. And also have some good questions about the responsibilities of the role for the hiring manager, so you can get a better feel for what you're going to be doing in this role to make sure you understand whether or not this is going to be the right opportunity for you. Does anybody have any questions so far? Great. Now, a good way to organize your answers for questions is using the STAR response. A lot of you have probably already heard of this, but it is a very comprehensive and complete way of answering a question. So if a hiring manager asks you, give me an example about a time you didn't achieve your goal and what you learned from it. So you start with your situation or your task. This is what we were charged with doing. This is what the action that we took. This was the result and how we didn't achieve the goal. And then you talk about what you learned from it. So you will not be in a situation where an interview will come away and say, oh, I didn't get enough detail. It allows you to put enough, but not too much detail into your responses to answering questions. Okay. Now, this is a little life hack that virtual interviews have made be amazing. So as I mentioned before, have some notes for yourself. Well, if you have notes on, your 8.5 by 11 paper, people can hear you moving them around. If you use 3x5 cards or Post-it notes, they're silent. I always say a virtual interview is like an open book test. You get to have all the notes that you want. And you can, behind your camera on the wall, pasted behind your camera, you can actually paste your notes on the wall. Make sure they're big enough that you can read them and there's not too much detail. So these should be just bullet point notes for yourself, just to remind you of key things that you want to talk about. But if they're on the wall behind your camera, nobody knows you're looking at your notes. Looks like you're looking at your camera, but you can see your notes. Okay.
Barbara, there are some questions from the audience.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Oh, some advice on career changes with some career gaps. So yes. So that's a great question, because we see now, people have different gaps, particularly as we're coming out of the pandemic, where people needed to take some time off to care for their family, start a family, those types of things. So my suggestion is that you always want to be very honest. So be very straightforward about any gaps in your experiences. You want to address why there were gaps in your experiences, as long as it's appropriate. And some things are private and you do not need to share those private things. There's going to be no expectation for that. But if you needed to take time off during the pandemic to care for your family, say that. It's fine. People understand it. You also want to talk about how you kept yourself up to date with the latest technologies. So if you really spent some time maybe doing a SAS course or, reading different publications to keep yourself up to date with the regulatory environment, those types of things, you want to highlight that and that's what you've done. I can speak, like I mentioned before, I can speak to the pharmaceutical industry, and that statisticians are in such demand in the pharmaceutical industry that if you have a even remotely decent reason for taking some time off, it's pretty much okay. And the companies are pretty much okay with that. Now, if you've had to take a very long time, and when I say a very long time, like 4, 5, 6, 7 years, that type of thing, getting another, and it's, I know, challenging, this is not an easy thing to do, but getting another degree can be very helpful because you are bringing yourself up to date with the current methodologies that are out there. Normally when we're working every day, we're getting exposed to the new things that are coming out. But when you've been away for many, many years, things can have progressed. So that can be another great approach. Get another master's in statistics, or even even a PhD if you only have a master's and you want to get a PhD. I shouldn't say only a master's. If you have a master's and you want to get a PhD, that can be very helpful. Recommending using a resume writer. I don't normally recommend that. I feel that technical resumes aren't that difficult to write. I think if you are in another space outside of statistics or programming or data management, it could be helpful. But I think in the space that we work in, a technical bullet point resume is relatively easy to write. You can find lots of examples on the internet for that. And even that's another, kind of a resource you can use a recruiter for, is just ask them for some examples of some good resumes that they've seen. And you said, do interviewers frown upon hearing notes, papers rustling? Sometimes they can. It can be distracting. And they can be like, what are you doing? You're kind of flipping through your notes like this, trying to figure out where you are. That can be distracting, and it can make an interviewer feel like you're not prepared. So if you have things just kind of laid out a little bit more, you don't have to move things around. You can just really quickly look at things. Yeah, that is definitely, that's definitely better. I'm sorry, I am losing track a little bit of where I was in the
Barbara, so all the
questions
questions you have answered, I have put it on the answer column. So
okay, great.
Thank you. Open.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, so one of the questions is, do I have any advice for finding and building relationships with good, reliable recruiters? And I'd say the answer to that is just have some conversations. So, if you're in a job search and you want to use a recruiter, talk to people. Just talk to them on the phone. You'll know pretty much right away if they know what they're talking about, if you feel comfortable with them and you resonate with them. You're having a conversation, you feel like, okay, this person understands what I do. They respect me. They respect my privacy, and they respect my decision-making, because that's something that you want to always be sure is paramount, is that all these decisions in your job search, whether you do it on your own or with a recruiter, they belong to you. And no one should be forcing you to do anything you don't want to, whether it's a company or a recruiter. You need to feel comfortable that you're making the decisions. This is your life and your career. So you really want to be, that's really important. And then really great question about preparing for a screening interview with HR as opposed to technical. So there's 3 different kinds of interviews that you're going to have. You're going to have technical interviews with individuals who are in the same space as you are, statisticians, programmers, data managers. You're going to have interaction interviews, and you're going to have human resources interviews. The technical interviews tend to be the easiest. It's what we know the best. This is what I excel at. I know what I'm talking about. I know the methodologies. I know the studies. I know what I'm doing there. Interaction interviews are when you're maybe talking to somebody who's in clinical, or who is a marketing professional, or who is, let's say a trader in finance. I'm stretching my knowledge here, but those are going to be, those interaction interviews are like, well, how do these people work with statisticians? How do they want to work with statisticians? What exactly are the questions that they need to get answered? So those are interviews where you want to come in and really ask people, how do you like to work with the statisticians? Talk to me a little bit about some of the problems that you're facing and how you think statistics can help you. Those are great interaction interview questions. Human resources, on the other hand, they can fall into a couple of different areas. So you can sometimes be asked what you're looking for in a salary. Nobody is going to ask you what you make now, but they will ask you what you want. So you want to be prepared. You want to know what your value is. This is kind of something I'm going to touch on a little bit later as well. But that's something you want to be prepared to answer. And a good general non-answer is, I'm looking for a fair and equitable offer in your organization. So if you're not answering that question because you don't quite know exactly what the answer is, but you're telling them, if you're fair to me and I feel like this is the place I want to be, we'll be fine. You also want to be prepared to answer interpersonal questions. So how do you deal with difficult people? Give me an example of how you deal with difficult people. Give me an example of how you improve your own processes. Again, that question I mentioned before, tell me a time when you didn't achieve your goal and what you learned from it. Those are the kind of interpersonal questions that you want to be prepared to ask, be prepared to answer from human resources. And in HR interview, you also want to be prepared. You can ask about company culture. And you can do not ask about salary, and do not ask about benefits. If they offer that information, then you can ask follow-on questions. But your initial interview with human resources should not revolve around what the benefits are, what the promotion schedule is. Those are those can be questions that can kill your interview. Okay. Sorry, now I need to put my glasses on here. Okay. Cassandra asked a question about entry level in terms of technical statistics skills, converting from a qualitative career in education and nonprofits, and kind of using that in negotiations. I think what will happen in those types of situations is you will have a leg up over other candidates who don't have prior experience because you understand how to work, you understand how to show up at an office, work with other individuals on projects. It oftentimes does not translate into a higher salary. So particularly at the entry level, companies, at least, and I'm speaking from the pharmaceutical industry because that's where I have my most knowledge, they have a range, and it's usually very, very narrow for someone coming right out of school, and that's what their salary range is. Unless you have prior experience that is highly applicable to the pharmaceutical industry, you will be looking at a salary that is pretty much on par with someone who is coming right out of school and did not have any interim work experience. And as far as that goes in other spaces, I'm not certain. I would think in marketing and possibly even finance that you could use that knowledge. And what you would need to do is be able to speak to why. Why does that experience bring you to another level in their organization? How can you use that to contribute in a way that somebody who doesn't have it could? Okay, hopefully that answers your question. And I think there's a question about, would finishing a degree be considered an appropriate gap? Oh, most definitely. Getting a degree, working on a degree is not a gap. It's an extending of your knowledge. So that's not considered a gap at all. But if you do have a gap, like I mentioned before, getting another degree can help you kind of close out that gap and show that you have current knowledge in the space. Okay. And explaining contract work compared to working for a company. That's interesting. Contract jobs vary in levels of responsibility. And I think we're seeing more and more that there is a little less discrimination against people who are contract employees. I think when you talk about your experiences as a contractor, you want to talk about your levels of contribution, any amount of strategic work that you've been able to do, any type of leadership and complexity of the work that you do. And understand that when you transition to a company, you're more than likely going to be transitioning into a role that's relatively similar level of responsibility. So if you're a contractor and you're responsible at the study level, so you've got 1 or 2 studies, you're probably not going to transition to a company and be responsible at the platform level and have multiple compounds that you would be responsible for. And again, I'm speaking kind of pharmaceutical industry terms, sorry. But that would be the same, if you were going to work in another organization, you wouldn't be, I'm working at the project level. I've got, a couple of, smaller size projects I'm working on as a contractor. You're not going to come in and be managing a whole team of people with a large platform of projects. So just kind of keep that in mind. Let's see here. So there's a good question here about how you calculate your salary and what your skills are worth, especially as an entry-level candidate. And that is going to become easier and easier starting next year. So next year, a lot of pay transparency laws are going into effect, where companies are going to be required to give pay ranges in a lot of the key markets. So California, Washington, Connecticut, New York State, I think New Jersey is going to be following suit pretty quickly, where companies are going to be required to post it in their job postings. And I think it's going to be extremely helpful for people who are doing job searches to see, exactly what their value is. Most industries have a pretty narrow range for entry-level candidates. I know the pharmaceutical industry right now is about $140,000 to $150,000 a year. That's what an entry PhD would get. An entry master's is probably more like around 100 to 110. But those are kind of, it can be difficult. It can be very difficult, especially at the entry level. And some of the salary surveys that the American Statistical Association does and others do can be good, although they do tend to lag at least 6 to 12 months behind, because it takes time to gather all the information from the survey, put it together, and then publish it. So a lot of internet searching is going to be your best bet there. Looking on Glassdoor and taking everything on Glassdoor with a grain of salt. But that and looking at different companies, because some companies do post already, even before the laws are in effect, what their salary ranges are. So good question about how you get an interview in industry. If you've never had any experience in industry, only in academia and healthcare. So as I mentioned before, the pharmaceutical industry is definitely very busy right now. So you want to look at your experiences and say to yourself, well, what have I done that translates to what's done in a pharmaceutical company? Have I worked on any clinical trials, even if they're observational clinical trials? And make sure that that's really clear on your resume. And, thinking about the therapeutic area, if you've worked on in academia or in healthcare, does that translate to the company you're looking at? Are you really strong at methodology? So if you're in academia and you've been doing methodological research, is that methodological research, does that translate to a company? And if yes, you really want to highlight that, and you really want to show that the positions that you interview for are appropriate for that. So if you're focused on methodology, apply for methodology jobs. And try to apply for jobs that are not too senior. That's another critical piece, is when you're applying for jobs, apply for jobs that are an appropriate next step for you, not 2 or 3 steps, because that can look like you don't understand your where you fit. And companies are like, that's just too much of a jump. You wouldn't be able to go from doing that type of skill set, like I said before, managing a project to managing 2 or 3 compounds. Okay. Great.
I saw some question from the audience. They just raised their hand, and
okay.
Feel free to ask. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Good evening to everybody. I raised my hand when I missed something. She was discussing about the questions we should be ready to answer from the employer.
Okay.
Yes, I missed some questions. I got back in track when you said they asked the question, tell us how to deal with difficult people. So I was really interested in the type of questions you could expect from employers during an interview. So thank you.
No problem. No problem. So you can expect technical questions about projects that you've worked on, methodologies that you've used. Those are your pretty straightforward questions. And then when you are interviewing with an interaction interview, so that's somebody who's not in your technical space, those questions can revolve more around how have you worked with regulatory in the past? How have you worked with clinical? Maybe tell me a little bit about, a time when you had an interaction or you had to convince someone in my area of a statistical approach. How did you go about doing that? What was the outcome?
Okay.
And then human resources questions, those fall more into the, how do you deal with difficult people? How do you improve your own process? Tell me about how you've, when you didn't achieve a goal and what you learned from it. And there can also be salary questions there as well.
Okay, thank you.
Great. I think a great question here is a really good one is what is a not too senior position? And I think that is something that you look at the responsibilities and you say to yourself, and only you can answer this question. So a hiring manager may answer it for you as well if they think you've stretched too far. But when you're applying, you can only answer it for yourself. Is this a little bit of a stretch for me? Or am I really reaching? Like, is this something I have never done before? And it is so much more responsibility than I am undertaking right now. That is really the key. An example too is like, if you're a senior statistician, don't apply for a director level job or a senior director level job. It's just such a stretch. It looks like you don't understand what skills are needed and what skills you have. And that can cause a lot of problems. So sometimes I'll see individuals and they'll apply for every single job that a company has in biostatistics, anything from a senior statistician up through, a senior director. And when that happens, the people that are reviewing the resumes look at that and say, this person just doesn't understand where they fit. It's just not going to work. So that's how you look at that. This is a really, really good question. So how should you explain a job title that does not match your actual work and responsibility? And I think that is happening more now because job titles are diverging at different companies. So what you really want to do there is be clear about what your responsibilities are. Quite frankly, that is what it's about. And I sometimes will say to individuals, yes, your title is principal to statistician, but it really equates to an associate director. And you can actually put that on your resume. Equates to associate director in most organizations. But really being clear and concise about what your levels of responsibilities are, initiatives that you've worked on, people will see and they'll understand, where your experience lies and kind of where you fit within their company and their organization. Okay. Great. Does anybody else have their hands raised?
Not yet.
Okay, great. All right, so we'll kind of move on, and we probably have touched on some pieces of the rest of the presentation, but that is okay. So, interview day. It can be really stressful and it can be really great. In-person interviews, I'm going to touch on this one because we haven't done these for a while. And sometimes you're going to find yourself in panel interviews. And even if you're not in a panel interview, really, really critical is you look people in the eye when you're speaking with them. Okay. I often, in this era we're in now. I still shake people's hand. I can't stop myself from it. It's just a natural habit. But everybody isn't comfortable with that nowadays. So just kind of be prepared. Don't get thrown off if you put your hand out for somebody to shake it and they're like, oh, I'm not doing that. It's okay, great. And if you feel the same way, if somebody puts their hand out who's interviewing you, to shake their hand, and if you don't feel comfortable, you can just say that, oh, I had a little bit of a cold just a couple days ago. I'd rather not. Makes it comfortable. But make sure that you look people in the eye. Make sure, as we talked about before, that you're dressed really professionally. And one piece I'd really like to talk about is the panel interview. So I'm seeing more and more panel interviews where you're going to interview with 2 to 3, maybe 4 people at a time. In person, this can be very challenging. So when you have a panel interview, usually you have a person ask you a question and you tend to talk to that person directly, but you want to really consciously make sure you're making eye contact with the other people in the room as well. And that way they get engaged in your answers and it doesn't become a one-way conversation with you and the person who asked the question. What can sometimes happen in panel interviews is that one of the people really is the more dominant. And when that happens, the other interviewers can feel like they're not making a good connection with you, walk away from the interview feeling like they didn't get what they needed. Not your fault, but you can stop that from happening. So if that happens and you're in an interview with 2, 3, 4 people and one person's asking all the questions, by looking at each of the people, that helps. But when it comes time to ask questions, you want to ask your questions of the people that didn't ask you questions. So start with them first. And that way you draw them in immediately, engage them in the interview, and they feel like, oh, great, this was a wonderful interview, as opposed to walking away and feeling like they didn't participate. Okay. Virtual interviews are a little easier because as long as you look at your camera, you're looking everybody in the eye, which is a wonderful thing. But the same thing applies for that. If one person tends to be dominant and is asking all the questions, you definitely want to engage the people that didn't ask questions and ask them questions as the opportunity arises. Okay. Now, another thing I want to talk about is when you're answering questions in an interview. So there, we talked about using the STAR response. What we didn't talk about is, what if somebody asks you a question you don't really know the answer to? So they ask you a question and you kind of think you know, but you're not sure. You do not want to answer that question with authority. You want to be clear that you're not certain of the answer, but this is what you're thinking. And then you start thinking out loud. This allows an interviewer to see your thought processes, allows them to see that if you had a little bit more time, you probably could get to the answer that they're looking for. And it opens up a little bit of a dialogue. Now, if you do not know the answer at all, like you have no idea, you want to state that as well. This is not something that I've worked on before. I've not had experience with this. If you and I were in a work situation and this came up, I would say to you, could I research this and get you an answer in, and think to yourself, how long is it going to take me to get an answer to this question? Can I do it in 24 hours? Do I need 48 hours? Do I need 72 hours? You say that. And then you say, would that be acceptable to you? Now, the key here is you have to get them the answer. So you now have to go do the research, get their email address, get them the answer to this question. But it is truly how you would handle this in a work situation. You are not going to have the answers to all the questions that come up, and you're going to have to find them. So if you run into that in an interview, as opposed to saying, I just don't know, that leaves an interviewer really wanting. So when you follow this like kind of research approach, they're like, oh, okay, great. I could see that that this could work in a work situation, as long as you get back to them with the correct answer. Okay. And after the interview, there are certain levels of follow-up that are really going to be important. So you can, in the final interview with either the hiring manager or human resources, you can ask them, when do they feel like they'll be making a decision? Very good question to ask. It gives you an idea. If companies also ask you if you are interviewing in other places, be honest. Yes, I am. I am at the phone interview stage. I am at the final interviewing stage. I am expecting an offer. Do not get into a situation where somebody is surprised at the end. People don't like surprises in this. We save surprises for birthdays. No surprises in the interviewing and offer stages. No, be straightforward. Companies will appreciate it. If you're on a tight time frame with another company, let them know that. If you are in a tight time frame with another company, but the company you're interviewing with now is your favorite and it's really where you want to work, tell them that. You say, this is my top choice. I am going to be put under some time pressure from this other company, though. Okay. Send a thank you email. So you don't have to send a thank you email necessarily to everyone that you interview with, but you should send a thank you email to the hiring manager. And if you don't have their address, send it through your recruiter or send it through human resources and ask them to thank the rest of the interviewing panel for you. Okay. And during that thank you email, talk about why you think this is the right opportunity for you and why you're the right opportunity for the company. You don't need to get into, it should not be a super long email. It should be just a few sentences, but you want to express your thanks, your interest, why you're interested, and why you're a good fit. Okay. And it is okay to follow up. Unfortunately, we're seeing, I think, a lot of companies not providing feedback. I think they're busy, and I think it's hard sometimes to say no to people, but it is okay to follow up and just let companies know where you are in your process. If you've got another interview, you're expecting an offer, that's fine. Not every day. You want to, follow up once a week is really appropriate, unless something really important comes up, like another offer. Then you want to follow up a little bit more frequently. Okay. And now we get into the negotiations. So this can be really, sometimes it can be tricky. It's hard, I think, sometimes for people to advocate for themselves. And it's hard to know sometimes when to advocate as well. Okay, so somebody asked how long to wait to follow up after an interview and how often. So thank you email the day of or the day after the interview right away, and then once a week. And unless, like I said, if you get another offer, and then you can say, I've received another offer. This is the time frame that I'm looking at. Love to hear back from you. And that is only if you're interested in the role. So if you walk out of an interview and you're like, I would never work in this company. I did not feel comfortable here. This is not the work I want to do. Still send a thank you email and just say, thank you for your time. I really appreciate you interviewing me. I learned a lot. And that's it. Okay. You never know where that hiring manager is going to work later. So is this the right company for me? Is this the right opportunity for me? So really asking yourself, does the mission of the company resonate with me? Is what they're doing, is that what I like? Do I really enjoy that? Can I see myself be excited to work on these types of problems every day? Do I feel like I could work well with this hiring manager, with the team? Did I, get along well with the clinical? Did I feel like the culture in the company is one that's going to be, nurturing for my career? And then does this role actually bring me closer to my ultimate career goals? Does it help me get those skills that I've determined I'm missing to get where I ultimately want to go? So these are like 3 critical questions that you ask yourself before you even consider negotiating with a company. Oh, this is a great question. So if I already know I won't come to a company after the 2nd interview, can I reject the 3rd interview? Yes, most definitely. You are actually doing the company a favor by not moving forward when you're not interested. They're using a lot of time and resources, as well as you are using your own time and resources to interview. So if you really are not interested in a company, thank them for interviewing you and just say, I don't feel like this is the right role for me. I really appreciate your interest, but I would like to, I'd like to stop the interviewing process at this time. They will really thank you for that. It's a very professional approach. Okay. So now what you want to think about, what am I leaving behind? So when you're thinking about getting offers, and this is something you kind of even really want to put together before you start getting offers, because you really want to be thinking about, well, am I going to get my bonus? We're coming up to that time of year now where, sometimes if you're working January 1, you get your bonus. Sometimes you have to be there when the bonus comes in. What's my target bonus? And that's all that's going to matter. Just so you know, your target bonus is all that matters. It does not matter that you've exceeded expectations for the last 4 years and you've got 1.5 times your bonus. A company, when they're negotiating, they're going to look at your target bonus, and pretty much that's it. Okay. What are my long-term incentives that I'm leaving on the table? You need to put together very clear documentation that's got your name on it, and it's got the dates when you were given your different long-term incentives, what the vesting schedule is, all those pieces put together. The rule of thumb in the pharmaceutical industry for most companies is that they try to cover 1 year's worth of long-term incentives that you're leaving behind. So anything that's going to vest in the next 12 months, they're looking then to replace anything outside of that with their own stock. And that's not every company, but that's just kind of like a little bit of a general rule. And then you ask yourself, well, how much paid time off do I get? And what does that look like? On average, that's not necessarily negotiable at a company, but it's something that you want to factor in for yourself. If you get 4 weeks paid time off and the new company's only offering you 2, does that realistically make sense for you? Is that, is the next level of responsibility enough of a trade-off, and the salary enough of a trade-off that you don't get those extra 2 weeks? If you don't use them, maybe it is. But if you do, if you use all your vacation like me, that can be a big deal. So it's just something to kind of keep in mind. So this is a great question. Do companies go to your previous company to investigate applicants? They should not. So they absolutely should not do that. Does it happen sometimes? Yes, I will not lie. That, people will be like, oh, I know so-and-so who works over there. Let me just give them a quick call. And they don't think about the damage that can do. So it can happen. It doesn't happen very often. And it's not done in any type of a formal way. So it's just unfortunately a little bit of a word of mouth. Yeah. So that's something to think about if you're applying to a company and you happen to be in a pretty tight market. I'm just going to use Chicago for an example, where, you know, a lot of, like, say your colleague's spouses work at another company that you're looking to apply to. That can be something that can be challenging. And you want to be straightforward with human resources, or with your recruiter, if you're working with a recruiter, and say, we need to keep this extremely confidential. Some of my colleagues' spouses work at the company. Can we keep the interview team very narrow? If you need to exclude certain people, you can say that. It's okay to say, this person, spouse, works with me. Can that person not be included in the interview schedule? It's okay. It's definitely okay to do that. Okay. And then let's see, so this is a really, really great question. So this is, can you retroactively negotiate an offer package that you've already agreed to over email? Say you've been offered a position that you won't start until 9 months later due to school. Can you revisit the stated offer? What I find particularly for entry-level candidates, that if the salary bands change, and I've seen this happen. I used to actually recruit in the entry level many, many years ago. And the salaries were evolving pretty rapidly at that time as well. And we would see individuals get a raise before they even started. So the company would say, you know what, we changed what our salary is. So I know we offered you X, but we're going to give you Y now because we're giving everybody else Y now. So you deserve this higher salary. And I think that it's pretty important for your career, for your long-term career, to stick behind a decision that you make. So if you accept an offer, it's really important to stand behind that. I'm not going to say it could, I'm going to say it will come back to you later if you don't. So you can go back to a company and say, you know, I have seen that the market has changed over the last 9 months and that the entry-level salaries are now X. Would you consider changing my offer? There's nothing wrong with that. But you do really want to, you want to stand behind your word. It is pretty important. And another thing I'm going to talk about as we go on here, think about, does it really make sense to negotiate a salary? So I'm going to use this question as an example. So let's say you got an offer for $140,000 a year and your entry, and it's 9 months later, and one of your friends got 145. You're like, I want 145. That's more. Ask yourself, is $5,000 really worth going back on my word or making it look like all that matters to me is the money? Because when you break it down and you divide 5,000 by 24, because you're probably going to get paid twice a month, and then you take taxes out of it, you probably won't even notice it. And it can be a really uncomfortable situation for a hiring manager and for you, and it can start things off on the wrong foot. Now, if things have changed by $20,000, that's a whole other situation. That's a different situation. But I also recommend, once you've accepted a job, stop interviewing. Just don't interview anymore. People ask you for an interview, they come to you with a job, even if it seems like the most amazing thing ever, don't do it, because you've already given your word that you're going to join a company. People are counting on you. They are planning all their resources around you joining the organization. And it can be very career limiting going forward when you've accepted a job and then you renege later. Okay, let's see. Okay, so let's see here. Oh, this is a really interesting question. Work from home question. There's a company based in San Francisco. This person happens to live in the Midwest. How do they adjust the salary or offer to account for the differences in the cost of living? Interestingly enough, we don't really see a lot of adjustments in the salary in the work from home situation. So I will see people in the Midwest get pretty much a San Francisco salary to work in the Midwest. There's not a, I always tell my clients, I'm like, you don't get a discount to hire somebody remotely. You pay a premium to hire them on site, but you don't get a discount to hire them remotely. So there's not a huge, from most companies, at least in the pharmaceutical industry, there's not a huge salary difference for a remote worker compared to somebody who's on site, even in such an expensive cost of living area like San Francisco or Boston. Okay. So this is a question. So if a company asks you if you're willing to be paid X, whatever that is, $80,000 before the interview process, should you negotiate for higher? If that salary that they're offering you is not in the market range, you can say, I was actually thinking of a salary more in X to Y range. I feel that fits into the market, and see what they have to say. If it fits into the market, it's like, yes, I'll definitely consider that. You're not saying I'll take it, but you'll say I'll consider it. And then part of that depends on how the interviewing goes. Okay. So next question is, we can't rescind or refuse an offer after 2 weeks if we get a better offer at another company. I would advise against it. I would. I think that it is, I've seen it happen in my career where individuals will negotiate with more than one company, or they'll accept an offer and then they'll reject and they'll take another offer. And it always comes out bad in the end, long-term bad in the end. So unless there's a real solid reason to do it, if you got family reasons, whatever that, where you really feel like I absolutely just can't do this, then you need to, contact the company that you are rescinding the offer from immediately. Talk with the hiring manager. Do not do it via email, and explain your situation to them, and apologize for rescinding your acceptance. But yeah, except for in very, very extreme circumstances, I really would not recommend it. Okay. Okay, let's see here. So we talked a little bit about researching salaries for your role, your level of education, your responsibility. Take into consideration the company size. A really small biotech oftentimes doesn't have as much cash on hand to pay big salaries, but they'll try and make that up in long-term incentives. And you can ask the salary range for the position. I said before, we're getting into these new pay transparency laws, which are, I think, wonderful. I think they're absolutely wonderful. I've seen too much of a disparity in what people make over my career. So I think it's going to be great. So you can ask for the salary range. They may not give it to you. It depends on where the company is located as to whether they have to or not. And don't expect that your salary is going to be at the top of that range. So companies like to hire at the midpoint of their ranges. It gives them room to give you a raise before you get promoted. Usually someone gets hired into a band, into a next level. So you're kind of coming in a little bit, more towards the bottom of that level of experience. And you're going to work your way through that to get promoted to the next level. And so you need some time. They need to be able to give you some raises before you hit up against the top of that band where they cannot give you raises anymore. Okay. So think about that. If somebody gives you, okay, the range for this job is 170 to 200. Think to yourself, okay, so I'm probably going to fall in around 185. Okay. 185 is perfect. That's the midpoint It's usually where people like to hire. They come in at 170, then you can talk about, negotiations up from there. So these are like kind of the components that you look at in your offer. And you ask yourself, what are the most important things here? Is the base salary okay? But the sign-on bonus isn't really going to cover the bonus I'm walking away from and my long-term incentives. Are the long-term incentives that the company offers so much less than what I'm getting at my current company? Where can I make that up? Is the paid time off so much lower than what I'm getting? Or is it a lot higher than what I'm getting? And does that offset some of the other things that maybe aren't exactly where I want them to be? So think to yourself, once you've decided, and this is the critical part, once you've decided this is a company I want to work at, okay, this is the place I want to work. So let's say you've interviewed 4 companies, okay, and you decide ABC company, this is really where I want to be. Okay, I've gotten offers from these 4 companies. They're all excited about me, but I really want to work here. That's the company you negotiate with, and the only company you negotiate with. Do not negotiate with every company. You pick the place you want to be, and you try and make that work for you. And you pick the parts of the offer, and I'll be honest, sometimes it can be all of them. I recommend it's not all of them if you can avoid it. Pick 1 or 2 things that are important to you and try and negotiate them. And be realistic in your negotiations. So if you feel like the base salary is $50,000 too low, your chances, unless you're a VP level, of getting $50,000 more in your offer are very, very small. So realistically, factor that into your decision of, is this the company I want to work at? Because your chances of being able to make that work are going to be really, really small. So once you decide, then you want to kind of focus your negotiations where it's really, really important. Okay, so pick those 2 things. I think my sign-on bonus, I need it to be higher, but why? Why should I get more of a sign-on bonus? So you want to lay out your reasoning. If you feel the salary is too low, this is the salary range that I was looking for. I feel that this is very much in line with the market and my skill set and for this role. So you want to have, good reasons behind your negotiations, not that you just want more money. Paid time off can be very tough to negotiate, but sometimes you can work something out with the hiring manager to get a little extra time off. When you do your negotiations, you want to propose a start date because it makes you serious. It makes the company think, okay, this person, they're thinking about coming here. They really want to come here. They've got a start date in mind. This is great. And also make it very clear that if you're able to meet my negotiations, I will accept this job on the spot. Companies do not like to negotiate and then get a rejection. It is not good for them. It's not good for the hiring manager. It's not good for human resources. They have metrics that they have to meet in their companies in recruiting. And, having offers be rejected, particularly after a negotiation, when the company meets the requirements of the applicant, are very, very bad. Yeah, they're very, very bad. We have a couple more questions. Oh, should you negotiate ownership of intellectual property in terms of development of models and statistical code during an interview? It is my understanding, and I could be wrong about this because I'm not an employment lawyer, but most companies will retain intellectual property. So what you develop while you're in their employ belongs to them. and that'll be in your employment papers. So you can negotiate things that you're working on outside of work belonging to you, but no, the things that you develop within a company, particularly a pharmaceutical company, they belong to the company. So that's my understanding. Oh, this is a great question. Do companies find that applicants who negotiate are more confident? I would say that does not play a factor. What they can find is that if you are too strident in your negotiations, they can find you're difficult to work with. So I think it more goes the other way than, this person's very confident because they negotiated, and this person isn't confident because they didn't negotiate. It's more if you handle your negotiations in a way that are aggressive, and that can be more of a negative, where especially if you try to negotiate everything and down to the last little bit, it becomes, a hiring manager can feel like, oh, this person's going to be difficult to work with. Like everything is going to be a negotiation. Everything is going to be a problem. And that's why I say pick the things that are really important to you, and kind of stick with them, but in a really professional way. Okay. Somebody knew, so coming from outside of pharma, they want to know what long-term incentives are. Those are stock. So that can be stock options or restricted stock units. And those, tech companies do that. Pharmaceutical companies do that. Not so much in finance and in marketing firms and banks, but, the tech industry and pharmaceutical industry are really big in providing some ownership in the company for the work that you do, and to help incentivize you to move the company forward. Okay, so are there any more questions? I have to say the questions that everybody asked today were amazing, and they were really great, really helped me bring even more information about the topic. Appreciate it. Does anybody have their hands up? I can't really see that.
I don't see that either.
Okay, great, wonderful.
Okay.
Well, I was just going to say that's everything that I had today, and really, really appreciate everybody coming and listening to the talk.
Okay, thank you so much, Barbara, for giving such informative talk. I wish I could listen to the talk when I try to get like an intern offer or like get a job offer. Okay, so and thank you so much for answering all these questions. Let me just do a final check of the questions. Yeah, so we have one more question at the last. Are beginners to a career allowed to negotiate?
Oh, yes, of course you can. Most definitely you can. I think when you're an entry level candidate, you're just coming out of school. Like I said, try and really ask your friends who've gotten job offers what they are, and ask a lot of people, because people aren't always honest. Sometimes people like to make it sound better than it was, but ask a lot of your friends, try and ask your professors. And if you get an offer that's really not in the range of what you think it is okay to ask a company if you had heard that the range for entry-level candidates is X to Y. Is there a possibility that we could bring the salary within that range? It's perfectly acceptable. There's usually not a lot of room for negotiation for entry-level candidates, but there's no reason that you have to take an offer that's far below what would be the market just because you're coming out of school. Okay.
And we have a couple more last minute questions.
Sure, no problem. So I'm not sure I understand this question. I think, is there a negotiation confidence tip that you have for, so I think if you do your research and you know that the, what the ranges are, you can, and it's, when you negotiate, you know, you're being professional, you're not being argumentative. That's where you can get your confidence from. So that, you know, I've done my research. I know what the ranges are. I really want this job. But I feel like I'm in a place where it's okay to ask this question. Now, the answer may still be no. They may just not have it in their budget. And you need to prepare yourself for that as well and decide, you know, is it a factor that's going to make me not accept a job? Let's see here. Oh, so how long before you're able to start a new job? I think, you know, that varies from individual to individual. And there's all different reasons why you couldn't start a job for a certain period of time. My advice on that is be very straightforward and upfront. I'm finishing up a very important project that's critical for my company and my career. I'd like to be able to complete that. That will not be done until X. I could start 2 weeks after that. Perfectly acceptable. I have a family vacation set for XYZ. I'd love to start after that. And so those are, you know, perfectly acceptable reasons to extend out your start date. You know, if you're coming from academia, you might need to teach, you know, you need to finish up teaching, all of those things. But if you're really straightforward and honest with the hiring manager, with HR, usually it is not a problem. Great. Oh, and how many years of experience would be considered as entry level? 0 to 1 years of experience is entry level. So, and it could be 0 to 3 if you're like kind of moving from one type of industry to another. So, you know, I've seen people, you know, kind of make a move. They are like started in finance and they want to go to the pharmaceutical industry and they've got 2 or 3 years of experience. They're still considered entry in the pharmaceutical space because it's not pharmaceutical experience. Okay. And as far as interviewing and getting an overview of your overall competition, you can ask a hiring manager how many people they're interviewing. Say, oh, how many people do you have interviewing for this role currently? That's all the information you're going to get, pretty much. But that gives you an idea of, okay, so they're interviewing 2 people, or I'm the only one, or, oh, wow, there's 6 or 8 people. I better keep looking. You know, I better not put my eggs all in this basket. And international students, how companies are treating visa sponsorship. That is really tough right now. It's a sad place, I think, for me. I think we need a lot of reform there because it's a lottery whether or not you're going to get an H-1B visa. And some companies are willing to take that risk and some companies are not. So I think once you get your H-1B visa, that is a whole nother situation and you will not have any problems at all. Companies are going to be willing to sponsor your green card. That's not a problem. I think another option is the O visa, the outstanding researcher visa. And if you can gather the documentation for that and have that ready, that can be helpful to you. And you can express to a company, I have all of this set, and I think I'll be able to qualify for that. And this is a good one too. For May, June graduation, you should definitely start looking for a job in January, February. That's a perfect time. Takes a little bit of time to look. And the ENAR is a great place to look for jobs. And the Career Center at the Joint Statistical Meetings and later in the summer is also a great place to look for jobs for entry-level candidates. It's wonderful. And experience during your PhD cannot be considered work experience. So internships are a huge plus. Companies love to see internships. They don't necessarily equate to, even if you did 3 or 4 internships, to a year or 2 of experience. You'll come in at the top of the pile of all the other people because you've got such great internship experience, but it isn't going to be, oh, wow, we can consider you having 2 years of experience now. It's just not the same, as work experience. And the research that you do can be very applicable and can make you more appealing, but again, it just doesn't necessarily translate to work experience. Aside from preparation, how can someone become a better and more confident speaker? You need to do it a lot. So my very first presentation, I'll be honest with you, I thought I was going to die. And it takes time. And, you really want to practice your presentation with your friends, your spouse, your pet. Just keep giving your presentations over and over again and keep practicing your answers. And this is something that I always say, and I remind myself this. You don't come to me to tell you how to be a statistician, right? You know how to be a statistician. You listen to me because I know about how to do a job search, how to negotiate a job. Think about, you know what you know, and be confident in what you know. And that's the biggest thing, is just really internalizing the experiences that you have and being confident in knowing that you have this knowledge. You've trained a lot, you've got a lot of education, you've come a long way, and you've got this, you know it.